Okay, part 3. There's a photo that I remember seeing a number of years ago when I was in Israel. That was one of those years, typically, where not much rain had fallen, and there was a gathering at the Kotel to daven for rain. It's a beautiful day, the sun was blue, the sun was out, and a couple of people brought umbrellas, which the media tried to show like how ridiculous they brought an umbrella to a prayer gathering for rain. Well, clearly everyone should have brought an umbrella to a prayer gathering for rain, because if it was the winter and you needed the rain immediately, you weren't saying, God, let it rain in 2 months. You wanted it now. Surely those that had faith in the power or the efficacy of prayer would have meant that the rain would have fallen almost immediately or very shortly afterwards, and bringing an umbrella or a raincoat was not something foolish, but something that expressed a lot of faith. At the end of Mincha this afternoon, I turned my eyes heavenward. I said, Hashem, let this be a successful event. Let people come away from this evening inspired, motivated. Let them gain something from having come out of their homes. And then my mind sort of went on a little drift. And then I'm thinking to myself, why is the warm-up guy going last? Like, you've had the main course, you've had the dessert. Why are you having the hors d'oeuvre at the beginning? And then it occurred to me that Providence had ordained things very, very cleverly. Obviously it's Providence, it's God, obviously it's clever. But having a whole evening about tefillah. So God makes me go last. So there's someone sitting there for the last 45 minutes davening his heart out that what he has prepared, no one else would have said. So I was like the symbol of what everybody was saying. Thankfully, only a couple of ideas, bizarrely, of what I had prepared, which shows that there's clearly truth, obviously in everything, but in the things that were said by the previous speaker. So there's plenty to say. But it occurred that that was my role for the first part of the evening. So what I want to start off with asking the question is, when we talk about, typical Jewish education introduces the character of Hashem as a character in the Torah stories. There's a story that I'm sure I've shared with you before, when Emily and I started off the community in Shenley, just outside Boreham Wood, about 20 years ago. Now it's grown. When it started off, we went there, they had a plan to once every month to have a service, and we went there every 2 weeks, and we got it moving. And one guy told me that he used to come to shul in the morning, and then he went shopping in the afternoon, and that when his kid had learned the song, Hashem is here, Hashem is there, Hashem is truly everywhere, and Hashem was in Tesco's Shabbos afternoon, the guy stopped, he left his trolley, and he went home, because he could, if God's in shul, I can understand. But if God's also in the supermarket with me Shabbos afternoon, and I shouldn't really be there, that was more awkward. But I thought how beautiful that this person actually achieved something that typical yeshiva guys don't really achieve, maybe till they're very old in life, that had recognized that God as a character is real. And that's a big, when it comes to davening, how much do we realize that Hashem is real? We don't often in Jewish education, as far as what I've been exposed to and what I expose others to, is we don't spend time philosophizing, discussing what we mean by Hashem, what it means, what are proofs for teenagers who begin getting cynical and doubt, is it real? God's a song, God's a character. And for me, the starting point of davening is recognize that you're really having a conversation with something that's real, with a being that's real. That's number one. And I don't know how obvious that is, because you're davening with a book. Davening with a minion is particularly nasty at destroying the power of prayer, because you're so freaked out. You've got to get 8:30 we start, 9:04 we finish. You've got to turn those pages with everybody else, otherwise you get behind. And you've just got to, davening becomes, if I get from page 1 to page 27, I've done a good job. And if I had to skip a bit in the middle, then maybe I wasn't. And it creates this neurosis, this panic. And perhaps sometimes it takes away from the fact that we are actually having a conversation with the only being that's actually real in this whole game of life. And it's not always easy to feel that or to recognize that. And then you feel perhaps that you're having no one likes going, and I'm sure we've all been potentially into call it you use a simcha, make it a positive example. You go to a simcha because you know that person, but you don't know anybody else in the room, and you're scanning the room. Who can I stand next to? Who can I talk with? And icebreakers are things you have to learn. How do you have an icebreaker with a stranger? Oh, do you come here often? Is this your local? Or whatever you say, whatever jokes you use to break the ice, to have that conversation. And sometimes when you're davening, you feel like you need an icebreaker, because God's this character that is sort of out there but not entirely real, because he exists in the book, he exists in the stories. And we formalize prayer sometimes to an extent that it doesn't become, it's not an expression of pouring out my heart or getting real with life, but it becomes this pantomime for some, or this act for others, this thing we have to do because this is what's socially acceptable, but not necessarily something we feel comfortable doing. There was a Rav in a new shul in Renana many years ago that came from a yeshiva background, learned, and he wanted to teach the new community the laws of tefillah, hilchot tefillah. Now he was talking to a bunch of Anglos who made aliyah, who for them, shul was pretty much where you go to express your Jewish identity. So any suggestion that kids shouldn't be in the room, because the halacha says that a kid who can't sit still shouldn't be brought to shul because it's going to disturb the concentration, was not something they were prepared to tolerate. And that Shabbos afternoon, there was quite an explosive conversation between the participants and the rabbi. He was coming from the law books. I mean, legally, he was absolutely right. Now, kids don't belong in shul, or they can't sit and can't behave because they're going to disturb the decorum. But they were coming from the perspective, well, that's where you go to be Jewish. So why would you not bring kids? But he was like, your home is where you're Jewish. Your whole life is where you're... And you have this clash of ideologies and perspectives. So my suggestion is, number one, we've got to really understand that conversation is real. We're not talking to ourselves. It's not an exercise in how quickly you can turn the page or how quickly your eyes can scan the words. You actually have to say the words out loud, not just scan them. And I often felt something like in a moment of craziness, if you put a microphone by the Omeds in weekday mornings, how many words would be picked up by the microphone? Actually, words that are said out loud. Tachnun for sure, no one says. I know that for a fact. There's someone that we know in this shul, doesn't matter who they are. I'm going to give it away by a hint. Who davens Nusach Sfard, and he says the Nusach Sfard Tachnun, which is shorter than Nusach Ashkenaz, and people still finish before him. Like it's not possible. Literally, when I used to go on the radio for the BBC, they had like a thought for the BBC Manchester, had to deliver a thought for the week on the Sunday morning program with Mike Shaft. And they told me you've got 2 minutes, that's 180 words, you have to whatever the time limit was, and they work out how many words you can say in a per second. And the number of words per second times the number of minutes we spend on certain prayers, it's not. I don't care how good your Aleph-based teacher was. Okay, or how many years you spent learning Aleph-based, as we've heard previously. Sometimes it's not possible, and we need to sometimes just free ourselves from that time constraint and that pressure, and just maybe realize that the conversation is a genuine one. There's an amazing book on prayer by Rabbi Tabor from Manchester, Mike Tabor's son, and in it he quotes a Mabit, who says, to paraphrase one line from the Mabit on davening, he said, no, davening is not a cash machine. We often tend to think it's a cash machine. Put in my request, out comes the answer, and then if it doesn't work, maybe I put the PIN number in wrong, or I got the wrong card. And if I just got the right details, then the answer, the cash would come out. That's not what davening is. Part of the proof of that is that we're a bit weird. If you think about Shemoneh Esrei, we're like, yeah, praise, gimme, then thank you. Well, I haven't got anything yet. Why am I thanking you? It's a bit weird. And Rabbi Tabor gives a whole mashal of a guy that needs some help from a philanthropist, and he gets told no, and he keeps coming back, keeps driving the guy crazy. And that's what we do. We gimme in the morning, gimme in the afternoon, the same gimmes in the evening. Thank you, but I haven't given you anything yet. Why are you driving God mad? And the Mabit explains fundamentally, and again, there are so many perspectives that this is one of where you actually could spend the whole night discussing davening, and you still wouldn't finish what you have to say. And Mabit says that tefillah is to teach us that everything comes from Hashem. It's not the cash machine in our language. And that's where we say thank you. That's where the modim comes in. We're not saying thank you for giving me all the things that I've just asked for. We're saying thank you for allowing me to understand that you are the source of everything, and without you I can't do anything, and I'll have nothing in my life. Rabbi Nachman, as a Rebbe of his approach to Chasidus, or his approach in Avodas Hashem, was very much about tefillah. And one of his students, Rabbi Nachman, the students took his teachings, and in this gorgeous sefer, Hishtapchus HaNefesh, says some beautiful things. The first quote Rabbi Moore mentioned from Adam Harishon davening, he had to daven, then we go. So I'll give you the second one. This is what he says. And the point here is to demonstrate that when we're davening, in Kabbalistic language, I think we need to have mochin de gadlus. I mean, you've got to open your mind and see yourself as not just you, the individual, but we are the inheritors of a tradition. So that when we're davening, we're not just doing something that sort of gets me in touch with my individual identity. We are tapping in to a national identity. And if we're ever going to get out of this golus, we need to stop thinking of ourselves as individuals and begin thinking of ourselves as a nation. Because when you think bigger than individuals you have in exile, I'm the individual Jew, there's the non-Jew, there's the poets beating me up, whatever. But for a nation, we need to come together and we need to tap in to the traditions and the power that our nation has demonstrated. The call of the sound of Yaakov davening. So here he gives from Noach. It's a famous medrash. The Zohar HaChodesh says as follows: Tana Rabbanon. When Noach comes out the teva, comes out the ark, and he sees the world is destroyed, he begins to cry. And this really can be, this is not just Noach, this is a metaphor for all of us. Sometimes we wait till things are wrong and then we talk to God. I had a conversation with a kid whatever it was, before we broke up for Sukkot in school, learning about davening. So, when do we daven? So the first answer was in a shiva house. So I didn't know, and he was the best one because the other kids didn't have a clue. So well done to the kids at the shiva house, and Baruch Hashem, he's been to shiva houses and he's seen a prayer service, but he had no notion that you would thank daven to say thank you to God or to celebrate, and that's where we're at. And those that are here and those that know have an obligation, as Rav Kook says. It's the duty of the doctor to give the medicine to the people who are sick, not the sick people to find the doctor. So I'm telling you, everyone sitting here now are the doctors. And we need to explain to the world outside that davening is not just for shiva houses. So poor Noach comes out, sees the world destroyed. It says, Rebbeinu She'olam, master of the world, Nikresa Rachum, you're called merciful. Well, this doesn't look like an act of mercy. You've destroyed the whole lot. You should have had mercy on everybody else. So Hashem says to him, you wonder sometimes why rabbis get their harsh language from? It predates the rabbis long ago, already the mystics, the Zohar Chodesh. Raya Shatya, you foolish shepherd, you moron, in modern parlance. Ka'an Amris Dar, now you're telling me you're called Rachum, yet only now you've worked out that I'm merciful? And not when I told you that you're the only righteous person, and therefore work it out, the world's going to be destroyed because you're the only good guy, and everyone else is wicked. And I told you I'm going to destroy the world. Why did you not talk to me at an earlier point? And then Noach got the message. And then Avram Avinu, he begs Hashem. And this is one of the most beautiful teachings, the way Rabbi Sachs explains it, that Judaism is the religion of protest. That Avram stands there in protest against Hashem destroying Sodom and Amorah, and goes to daven for people who are not like him. And that famous introduction of the Netziv, that Dafka, that they were called Yesharim, they were called Ehrlich, straight people, because they cared about people who were not like them. If you haven't read the introduction of the Netziv to Bereshis, study it. You can get it online as well in translation if you can't understand the original. It's a powerful one. And he's davening and he's negotiating. And then Yitzchak goes Lasuach Basoda to go and daven in the field. And Yaakov, Yifkov, he goes through the whole introduction here, demonstrating to us this is the way we do things, and not to be outdone, as Rabbi Moore said, and this is where he took some of my ideas as well. Also, the imahos, the mothers as well. Sorry, Rachel Baleah, davening. We have Rosh Hashanah, Chana davens. Paul's the Gemara learned the whole Chana story. Davening for her kid is the source for where we get taught how to daven, how we daven our regular tefillas. So we need to understand that davening is part of our national identity. It's not something just that the frummers do or that you do just in a shiva house. We need to reclaim davening as something that's an expression of what it is to be Jewish. What it is to be Jewish, not just to eat kosher or to have Shabbos. Jews daven. And how do we daven? We daven in good times, we daven in bad times. We daven for people who are like us, we daven for people who are not like us. that they should be spared, that Hashem should have mercy on the world. But what when it goes wrong? What do I mean by goes wrong? Don't get depressed, because the reality is when you're asking for something and it doesn't come through, you begin to get a bit frustrated. As we heard before, it's not always easy to daven. And sometimes you can be in a situation where you really want to, and you think, well, logically, you've learned somewhere or other, intellectually, I should be davening now. But I can't daven because I'm in a really bad place. Says Rabbi Nachman, just say something. Don't worry about the page-turning davening. Don't worry about getting through everything in the text that we have to say, that you would say when things are normal. Just say, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the world. Just say, just groan. I know there's a pasuk in Tehillim, my kvetch, my groan isn't hidden from you. Meaning when you do something wrong, we don't even enjoy ourselves, because sometimes you feel like, I've let myself down. Even that speaks volumes to Hashem. A sigh can express sometimes what the spoken word can't capture in words. A sigh, a shrug of the shoulders can also be, maybe that's Peshat. When David Vanit Tefillah, he became, as the Rav said before, his whole personality was infused with, I am a prayer, or we say for Inishmas, all my bones will say, Hashem, who is like you? Yeah, the shrug of the shoulders, the sigh, the tilt of the head. All of those are not just physical actions, but maybe that is part of davening. When we can't daven with words, when that's not working for us, then a physical action can express something that perhaps our words struggle to. So we need to normalize davening. Originally, before the books were printed, before the text came about, everyone just spoke what was on their heart. And then we know that the men of the Great Assembly, Anshe Knesset Gedola, came along, and they established our fixed prayers. Because it was difficult. We've all had conversations where you walk away thinking, should have said that. I should have said it that way. Or for me, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, why did I do that? Okay, you tick the box. What applies? I know what applies to me. You can work out which one of those. Wife's nodding. She knows that. See, that was a moment of truth. So we know that we need a fixed text because it's complicated. Ach, al kol panim medina zeru ikar tefillah gam kein achshav. This is now becomes what we have to do, but we shouldn't think that the previous version, that spontaneous prayer, has lost its efficacy, lost its power, or lost its place. And that's part of normalizing a relationship with Hashem. So, yes, it's difficult to build that relationship, and without that, I think, why people come to shul in some shuls and talk is because they know that the person next to them is real. They don't know that Hashem is real. And you look like a lunatic talking to yourself. So if you're not convinced that God is real, you're never going to talk to him. And so how do we make God real? We have to learn to talk to God and make God a character in our lives, not just 3 times a day in the formal sense of prayer, but throughout our lives. And Rabbi Nachman teaches us that we mustn't give up. And I'm going to end with this teaching. I've got loads here, but we'll just end with this. Sharei tefillah einon nin olim la'olam. The gates of prayer are never locked. Yesh tefillah, some prayers are answered after 40 days. Who do we learn that from? Moshe Rabbeinu. He davened 40 days for the Jews to be forgiven after the golden calf. V'yesh tefillah shena'anis la'asrim yom. And some are answered after 20 days. We learn from Daniel. Lechem chamudos lo achalti ad mela'os shlosha shavurim yomim. Until the 3 weeks had passed. And then he said, Hashem is heard. Yesh tefillah, that's answered after 3 days. We just heard at Yom Kippur, the tefillah of Yonah, that answered after 3 days. V'yesh tefillah shenanis yom echad, and some prayers are answered after a day, from Eliyahu Hanavi. And sometimes, v'yesh tefillah, she'ad shelo yitzpalel osa mipiv hunana, and sometimes, I would say on a fast day, before you've said it, God's already answered it. That pasuk we add in on a fast day. V'haya terem yikra'u va'ani ana. Before they've called out, God's going to answer. So don't give up. It can be a process. And we have to recognize that prayer and a relationship with Hashem is something that develops throughout our life. And the challenge we have, I think, is that some of the things that we learn to do when we're kids, we tend to pigeonhole in our mind as childish or easy things to accomplish. We learn to daven when we're children, so it should be easy because kids do it. But kids do it on a certain level, and as we grow and as we mature and as we understand Hashem differently, then we should recognize that we have the power to pray spontaneously, the power to sigh, to recognize that davening is about recognizing that Hashem is the address, and we should daven that our learning tonight, all the things we've learned, so definitely Rabbi Nachman teaching, that we should daven that the Torah we learned tonight shouldn't just remain in the abstract, in the world of theory. We should all merit to be able to practice all the lofty teachings tonight. Have a good kvittel, a good yom tov. Thank you very much.